Welcome back to another podcast episode where we help aspiring developers get jobs and junior developers grow. Today, we're going to be talking about, and I already promised I'm going to butcher this, so bear with me, the full stack web development program or coding bootcamp at the University of Texas at Austin. I'm sure that name's a little bit off, but I will we'll go into more details, and I think you'll have a good idea of what we're talking about. But what I did was I brought 3 graduates on to give transparent reviews. Because as we know, a lot of reviews and sales pitches are delivered to a lot of people and they leave certain details out. We do not do that here. So I'm really excited to review this one. A lot of people requested it, but we'll go ahead and get started with intros. Rika, let's see. I got to remember my questions because we got a brand new format. The second time I'm doing this. So when did you graduate? Are you still looking for a position or did you find one? And what was your background before you went to the coding bootcamp?
The first one was when I graduated, which was July of 2020. What was the question after that?
No, that's okay. I have to remember. So when you graduated, and then, oh God.
There was if I'm working, I am not working, but I didn't really start actively looking until the beginning of this year.
Okay.
I was doing kind of like side stuff and working more on the networking side versus going straight into job search. And then the other question was what I did before that, civil engineering. And I went to the University of Texas at Austin for that degree, which is why I was good with the boot camp.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. How about you, Deanna?
So I graduated from the boot camp in, I think it was like September, October. It was supposed to end in October, but somehow we ended in September. I am currently employed, and my background is data analytics. I'm a data analyst, and I have some data science background, and that's what my current job is. But I am still actively seeking new employment just to kind of hoping to get into a more of a web developer IT role and a little to kind of get away from data analysis and use these skills that we paid for.
Makes sense. Best of luck with finding that position. But, and maybe it'll come up, but a lot of people they're taking positions where their background synergizes with it that doesn't quite fit the new career track that they're trying to go into. We talked about like people getting into product management, QA, just kind of like roles slightly like close to software engineers. But we do get and I do see a lot of people getting into data science that do eventually transition. And I think the coding bootcamp is a really, really good strategy for that. It just might take a little bit of time.
Yeah, data science, you know about 2 languages, Python and R, right? And then the web development, multiple. So that's kind of like what I wanted. I wanted to know more than just Python.
Very cool. And just to be clear, you graduated in 2020, September, right?
Yeah, correct, yes.
Cool. All right, thank you. How about you, Elba?
Same for me. I graduated in October 2020. I haven't found a job. I'm still searching for one, and I'm trying to kind of make a decision of what position I would want to go after for, what type of title. I come from marketing. I'm a marketing associate, and I just decided to, I work for Indeed, so after being in a tech company, I was surrounded by obviously a lot of tech people around me, and I see that's the future of our lives. And also a Netflix documentary of they said, we're surrounded by tech every day, but we don't know how it works, right? You have this thing called your phone that it knows everything about you and has all your data and all of that, but you don't know how it works or like even the basics. So I was like, let me try coding. And I know I want to pivot my career as well. I mean, marketing is cool, but I really liked the tutorials that I was doing by myself for a while on, through YouTube, and decided to go into this field. I have interviewed for a QA position within my company, and it was really interesting to see basically how. And I want to do what you said. Like, I want to start with something that is on the periphery of web development, and then get the hand of it, because I am a newbie. I'm just gonna do the baby step kind of journey. I can't just dive head first type of thing. So because I knew nothing about coding before the bootcamp. And I actually lost the position of the QA to one of my classmates, which I was proud of. I was like, somebody's going to get that job. I was really happy that it was her. So, yeah.
Really enthusiastic attitude. I'm sure you're going to get the next position that comes along your way. That's awesome. All right. So why do you choose this coding bootcamp? Anyone can talk. And we're going to talk over each other a little bit too. That's okay.
Well, I mean, I already kind of said mine was because I went to UT Austin for engineering school. I know the school is very specific about their brand, so whatever coding boot camp they had was going to at least live up to their standards, which meant that it was good for me. But I had been looking on and off for a few years about thinking about doing a boot camp, because self-learning kind of didn't work for me, because I didn't know what to concentrate on. And so I saw that UT had it, and I was like, okay, that's good enough for me. And it worked out time-wise. So that was my reason.
Cool. How about you two?
So I was looking for ways to learn more coding languages. I did like a Python tutorial or a course online, and that was self-taught. And then I was like, okay, how do you learn multiple languages all at the same time without having to just run through HTML, CSS, JavaScript, right? Like, and so I think I just Googled and I came across the boot camp. And I just chose UT Austin because it's in state, so probably a cheaper tuition, right? And that was it. My background is, or I have my master's in math, so kind of like not using that and doing web development was definitely a change of path, but I mean, I wanted to kind of get more into the technology world. So.
Okay.
Definitely having math on your side works perfect, or works better, especially during JavaScript, and you have to do all those functions.
Yeah, JavaScript doesn't have a lot of math.
I was like, oh, not the functions. Myself, the reason why I chose UT, it was cheaper than General Assembly and Flatiron School for very similar, I would say, curriculum. And also, since Austin, that's where I'm based. I'm in Austin. So since Austin is the next Silicon Valley, I was like, where else better than just going to UT here? I mean, they're going to start recruiting from here anyways. So they're going to be like, oh, and UT is big here. So those were the primary reasons why I chose that one.
Okay. Sounds like reputation for the most part is why everyone chose UT of Austin, and that makes sense. You had mentioned, Rika, and we'll get into more detail about the curriculum, but you had mentioned that the program was bought out by Trilogy.
I mean, I don't think it was bought out. It was just kind of like contracted out. So when I signed up for it, didn't really say that anywhere, but when we started the actual boot camp, the instructor and the TAs didn't work for UT. They worked for, I think it was Trilogy, I think is what it was called. And
correct.
A login for like little website that we submitted everything to and got information from. It did say UT on there, but it also said something like from Trilogy. So I think it's like a contracted thing.
Yeah, I think the other boot camps, even if it's in a different state, they all use Trilogy, because like when I would Google some of my issues, the other like snippets of modules would come up, I've noticed, and then it would have like Trilogy on there. So I was like, oh, I guess it doesn't matter which boot camp you go through, they all use the same curriculum. But I know, like, when I went through it, sometimes an instructor would make like little comments, or the tutor that I had assigned to me, they would make comments like, oh, UT Austin, this module is ahead, and the module we have with the other university boot camp, they're behind, but they were all Trilogy. So I guess that's kind of confusing, maybe.
It was definitely confusing for me because I didn't know going into it, but just kind of figured it out along the way. But I guess it sounds like UT does have some input on like updating the curriculum. But I do know that this is the same program a lot of other universities use when they have. It's not a certificate for like a bachelor's or something. It says certificate, and it's like sponsored by their business development, like future development kind of thing, where they have side programs. I don't know exactly all of the technical. Very confusing.
Okay. This is still helpful because Trilogy has its own reputation. That's really interesting that they outsourced to Trilogy, but it sounds like they still had a little bit of input. Okay, well, let's jump into the curriculum. What did you learn? What was it like?
For me, it was really fast-paced. I mean, for me, I feel like the only way I got through it was because it just happened to be during COVID, and I was working from home for a couple months during COVID, and I was able to like knock out my work, and then I would do my boot camp stuff at home, or I would kind of sneak it in at work. And so, but for other people who were like super busy with a full-time job and having to do the boot camp at night, like I can only imagine like how many outside hours other people had to put into it.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad for me because I wasn't working at the time. All of my time was going into coding. So I spent a lot of time doing that, but I did see a lot of people in our group kind of struggle because it was January to July, so COVID hit like 2 or 3 months in when we were starting to hit JavaScript and Node, and then it just kind of steamrolled from there. And I know a lot of people got lost because it was fast-paced and also not like fast-paced planned to happen during a pandemic. So that kind of made things difficult, but luckily I have like a technical background. I have programmers and stuff in my family, and I lived with a web developer at the time, so I had a really good support system there, and I got more from the other people that were in the course than I necessarily got from the actual material. But that's my personal way of learning, is working with people, and I definitely liked that aspect. It was great. Awesome friend.
Cool.
Yeah, I resonated with both of the ladies on that. Very fast paced. I was like, I don't know how somebody, because there was an option to do this part time, and I was like, I don't know how people are doing this part time, which is like 3-4 months. So I don't know how people do that. And then at the same time, I do resonate with the class is very collaborative. Like, yes, you get stuff like the basics or the foundation from the class, like the lectures, but most of it, if you wanted to stick, it's through the projects. Those were the best ones. I would say that's where I learned the most, and from homework, collaborating with people through that. Speaking back to what Deanna was mentioning, I don't know if I would have probably quit, and we had somebody in the class quit halfway through, which I felt bad because I'm like, I don't even know if this person is going to get his money back or something. I have no idea what happens. So he quit. But I was happy that I was doing this happened during COVID, because I don't know how, let's say, go from work, commute, go to UT, and then from UT commute back home. I had no car at the time. I come from New York City, so I don't drive. And when I came to Texas, I just came here without a driving license. So I really, it worked to my benefit to be at home. But the connection, I would say, maybe with some of the students, it would have been better in person, like to actually be there and work instead of like sometimes like some of the group projects. Well, that's where they fell off, I would say, because it would be just through chat and people would be reluctant to reply, or like they would just be silent. It was just a lot of that. But overall, it's for me, I would say it was a great program. If you come with it's better for people that have some knowledge already. Like Rika said, like if you have programmers, around you, or you have friends that already do that or something like that, you kind of know. But if you come with someone like me, like myself, to me, that's just gibberish. I did not know what it was. I was good at HTML, CSS. Once JavaScript hit, that's when I was like, what the hell is happening? And I was able to stay afloat, basically. That's how I graduated, at least. Yeah.
So I had a question. Were both of you in you actually went in when you signed up for it, did you go into UT at all?
Not at all.
No, mine was 100% remote. I'm like 6 hours away from Austin.
Okay. Mine was also, I was in Dallas at the time. I was just wondering. Ours was, when we signed up, it was 100% remote. So we already had like the structure put in.
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun just doing the Zoom calls and using Slack to communicate, because I want to work remotely, ideally, and I actually really enjoyed that part of it.
Yeah, I was going to extend on Alba's comment and yours. The whole how she said, like in meetings or group projects, like people were silent, and I would definitely agree on that, because I feel like if I had to actually attend a class, like I would have probably felt a little bit better, because doing the self-learning and the modules, like I would finish everything and start the project and then be like, oh, what did I just read? Like I just spent like 12, 20 hours. I'm like, I don't remember anything. So I feel like sometimes working self-paced remotely might have been a struggle a time or two. Definitely.
Okay.
I might have a different perspective on that, just because instead of when everybody was silent, I always chipped in, because I don't like wasting time. So I guess that might be why I have a different view.
Yeah. I feel like that's
real quick though, because a lot of content there. I just want to touch on a couple things and we'll keep going. So everyone had you went through a part-time program. It's all part-time?
I went full-time.
I was
okay.
Which one? What's the difference?
Months.
Yeah, mine was 6 months. So which one is that?
Part-time is 3 months.
Okay, I did the 6 month.
Got it. Okay. So 2 part-time, 1 full-time, and it sounds like it was all self-paced, and then you would gather together to maybe do a project that would reinforce what you had just learned in the self-taught program. Does that sound correct?
It was mostly homework. Like you cannot graduate if you don't do your homework. I think you get 2 passes, 2 homeworks that you do not do, and you need to do your 3 major projects. And that's how it was.
Right. It was about like 3 to 4 chapters, 3 to 4 topics, and then a group project. Another 3 to 4 topics, and then a group project. And
gotcha.
Something like that.
That helps me visualize it a little bit more.
Mine was a little bit okay. Like we had a pace. We had it every week. We knew what we were doing, and each class we had like all of the material that we were going to do. Was that the same for y'all also?
Yeah, it was every week. Then the new entire module, like or chapter, would open up, and then you could just if you could finish it in 2 days, that was awesome.
Yeah.
So
no, definitely works. If you don't have a job and this is what you're putting your time to it, obviously you good doing good. But having a job, and you're doing other stuff, and plus, you got to take care of yourself. For example, me, this bootcamp taught me that I put too much on my plate. And I told myself, never again will I do this. Like, it just made me recognize that I just tried to do too much.
One and done.
Because it impacted me when it comes to my mental health. So, like, I started getting panic attacks towards the end of the project. So I was like, this is not good.
I did have a couple, I remember, like, this one girl in my class, she had told the instructor, she's like, I mean, it's like Friday or Saturday and I'm still doing the module. Like, I haven't even started the homework. And his advice was just like, just read faster. It's like, yeah, but like you said, I mean, she would, work and then commute home. And then, especially if you have a family you have to take care of, and then you stay up till midnight coding.
So do they give you a heads up about the time commitment, the realistic time commitment?
Yeah, for me, they said it was, a minimum of 20, but it was about 30 hours at least for me. And it was for me, it was like all day, Saturday, Sunday.
Wow. That was the part-time program. Okay, 30 hours for the part-time, and it took over some of your weekends.
Yeah, and for ours, we had it always Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday mornings that we would meet for like class. But like between that time, everybody was still working on their own stuff or like working on the homework for that week. I was planning on putting all my time into it because I wasn't working at the time and like technical stuff.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you feel like they did a good job of screening people initially and making sure that you were ready for the program? Because I get this vibe that if you learned more fundamentals before you went in, you would have been much better off.
For when I signed up for it, they did send out like free work that you could do if you wanted to like get familiar with some of the stuff beforehand. I don't know if it was like required for you to do it, but I do know that people that went in with some knowledge had a easier time going forward, and that was kind of, I like teaching and working with people and learning together, so I kind of helped bridge some of those gaps because I did see it a lot. There were a lot of people that were coming to tech for the first time, and my dad's like a database engineer, and my sister and her husband are both DevOps, so I have a big community of like programmers around me. So I definitely saw the big gap there, that like I had a huge advantage over some of the other people that were coming in and they didn't know anything about any of this. And I do think that those, that difference was definitely super difficult. And if you didn't have people in the class that could help you along, or if maybe the PAs or the instructor, it sounds like for Deanna, was maybe they weren't as helpful as mine were. They were, for my instructor and stuff, anytime we had questions, they were pretty good about getting back to us with them. But
yeah,
I don't know.
I agree with the background part. Like there was a lot of people that I came across that, like, some people are like, oh yeah, I've kind of been coding already for my job. I just didn't know some of the other languages or tools, so I took the coding bootcamp, and they, I mean, it wasn't a struggle for them. Like, we still put in a lot of work, but then for the people that I've talked to in the course that didn't, I mean, this was like brand new, like they'd never even opened Visual Studio Code before. I think those were the people who definitely struggled a little bit more, just from what I witnessed.
I'm those people. I was just like right here.
Yeah.
In terms of timing, what I wanted to correct is that so the full time, the 6-month class had, so I did Tuesday, Thursday, but you would do 2 days on the weekday, and those were the 2-hour classes, and then 4 hours on Saturday. So that's how the schedule went for the whole 6 months.
That's crazy. Both of y'all had a Saturday, and mine.
Yeah.
Thursday was the only mandatory. We had a Tuesday, but it wasn't mandatory. And we didn't have like weekends. We didn't have meetings on weekends.
Oh, wow.
Weird.
Yeah.
They were very specific that they wanted us at like all of the classes. We had to have our cameras on.
Yep.
Wow.
They had noticed that you put it off for so many times. Someone would say something to you, and then like kept attendance and stuff. We had to check in, and if we didn't, like, I don't know how it's different, but ours was definitely more strict. I don't know
That's
if
crazy.
it's because it was decided on before COVID, and I know it was one of their first remote-only things, so maybe that's why they were more strict with us, but...
Yeah, we were supposed to have videos on too, but on the Thursday mandatory, like a lot of people would just had the video off, and when we would like break out into groups to work on stuff, I mean, a lot of times it was just like 10 minutes of pure silence. It's like, is anybody really working on this?
No, my instructor, he would tell us, because also people would give, obviously on the side, privately feedback to him that, listen, I'm going into the breakout room and nobody's talking, or people are not, they're not playing teammate, basically. So My instructor, he would say, his name is Jeff. I mean, he's amazing. And he would tell us in the beginning, listen, he was like, if I get feedback that you guys, I'm going to drop into the rooms randomly, and if I see that you guys are not talking, there's going to be, it would be an issue. Like, he would tell us that you need to communicate.
Wow.
So
I guess it just kind of depended on your instructor and how much they
and the TAs,
cared, maybe.
Our TAs, jumped into all of the break rooms. They would jump back and forth.
Yeah.
I know that when they split us up, they always tried to have at least one person in each group that, like, for me, had a background and might have a little bit more of an understanding so that we could kind of guide the group. They didn't really tell us that going in, but in one of the classes, they ended up putting 3 of us in one break room while they were splitting everybody else up, and then one of the TAs jumped in and was like, this is what's happening, we're going to move you in a second. But we know from your homeworks that you guys at least have enough of an understanding that maybe you can guide everybody else. So it definitely sounds like, I mean, mine was earlier than you guys. I don't know if maybe they're just like getting overwhelmed.
I personally love that. I love that they decided to go with a mixed group. In my class, I could tell that there was more people that had some sort of, like you said, I wouldn't call it advanced, but they had some sort of knowledge with, computers and software, and they have coded maybe a little bit before. And only like 2% of us were like brand new into this, in order to diffuse the groups. So you would make it, like you would learn from each other.
All right, so it's a good summary with kind of instructors and different structures. It's really interesting here. I mean, it is a challenge trying to get everyone to participate, and I know a lot of coding bootcamps struggle to just turn those cameras on, and like they're basically having to babysit people, because it's one thing if they do that with the self-taught and they don't really follow through and they're not interacting with everyone, but you paid. And when you have people that aren't participating, that's a huge problem. So I love that they're on top of that for the most part, from what it sounds like. Quick question, and then we're going to move on. When you applied, was there a chance that you were going to get rejected? Did they do like a coding screening at all? Or did they just accept anyone?
For me, I think they asked for transcript, and then I took a quiz online. And then once you submitted the quiz, like for me, they called me back within a few minutes, and they're like, "Oh, this was your score. Do you still want to apply?" Like,
yeah, I think there was a quiz that I did, and I know that I had to I wrote something for them to approve me to go in. So there was like a little chance that it was a rejection thing, but it also, I mean, it was a pass-fail class. As long as you did the work and put in the effort, then you were going to get the certificate.
You still got like grades though, like 76, 45, something. But I think I don't know how that really worked at the end for people who really got like lower than C's consistently. I mean, it's like, okay, was it really a pass fail, or did at the end, if you had an average of a 50, like, was it pass or fail?
Yeah, I don't know.
I wondered that too.
Measure that, but I do know it was like dependent on were you actually trying to learn,
Right?
And like as long as you put the effort in and you were like contributing and trying, I mean, not everybody learns at the same rate, and especially with programming, it's like you have to do it so much until it just kind of clicks, and that time period might not be it. So I understand like why it's pass fail and why they put like grades on it. I don't know how it worked for people who weren't doing well, because that was not me.
Well, I know in my class, some people had just bad luck with the graders, because the grader wasn't the instructor or the tutors. It was just like random people, I think in Trilogy or at UTS, I'm not sure, but like some people would be like, I did this, and that, and they took off 50 points, and I'm like, I did the same thing, and they only took off 5 points. Like, I don't know. I think sometimes there's cases like that where some people maybe just kind of got bad luck with the grader.
Well, why would they even ask for your transcript initially? Like, a lot of people came in with different backgrounds, had nothing to do with software.
I didn't have to give my transcript. That was
okay, maybe not. I didn't remember. I just remember we took the quiz, but the quiz was like nothing related to coding. It was like
nothing technical.
Puzzles.
It was a web browser. I think that was like, they were very basic questions on mine. Was what do you use to use a search engine? Like, what is that called? It's a browser. I don't understand who this is geared towards.
Okay, so I think it's safe to say they didn't really screen anyone. What you're describing, I don't even see the point of doing that. And that can be frustrating. So, they probably paint this picture that, anyone can learn to code, and, we're going to be accessible to everyone. And that sounds good. And it sounds like what they're probably going for until you get into the program. And like even these instances of people going AFK and feeling overwhelmed, a lot of that comes out in different ways, but they're struggling to keep up because they weren't well prepared. And this idea that, there is pre-work, but it's not required. And it, Deanna, you mentioned the idea of like, you got a score, and they said, do you still want to proceed? Like, that doesn't sound like they're trying to make sure that you're ready. It just sounds like they're trying to give you the option. Now, the problem with that is, when you work on projects, when you interact with others, everyone's going to be on a different level. And it sounds like they don't even hold you back or have you repeat any content. So if you're really falling behind, they're not really failing you out of the program. And Rika, as you said, like, as long as you're participating, it sounds really nice to let people push forward, and they should continue to learn coding. But, if they're falling behind, you got to do something to catch them back up and try to comfort them into the idea of like repeating this lesson. And it's really going to make you very well off and make you competitive in the market when you graduate, because ultimately everyone's going for a job. They need to be prepared to get a job. Who cares if you graduate? That doesn't matter, right? It's like you go through these educations to get a job. And so I'm a little bit concerned that they're not stricter with that. That can create a bad experience for other students. But that, to be honest, I've heard similar reports with Trilogy Education specifically, and we've covered Trilogy Education many times. I'm just kind of like thinking out loud, but those are a couple concerns I have. But it sounds like the curriculum itself, like overall, it's pretty good. It's fast paced. If you learn your fundamentals, take the pre-work seriously, you're going to be pretty well off in the program. Does that sound correct?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, if you actually like read the stuff and not copy paste the code and know what you're typing in, then you should be set. Like, you should half understand what's going on, or at least half,
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I mean, as long as you put like whatever time you have to put in to understand something, I mean, they're not hand-holding to an extent. For me, there were some of the TAs that would check in with people to see how they were doing, if they knew they were struggling, or try and do like one-on-one time with them if it needed. Like we had one TA that did like supplemental things that were like not part of class, but she would kind of pick a day, like Monday in 2 weeks, we're gonna sit down and we'll talk more in depth on whatever this concept is. So I know that maybe it's different between like which EAs are there and which instructor you have, but I do think there were opportunities, but I definitely still saw a lot of people falling behind, and they got really discouraged. And I know I talked to a lot of them because I was like, the boot camp, we're in the middle of a pandemic. It was already going to be really, really difficult. I see why you're struggling. How can I help? And as a group, I think our boot camp, we kind of worked more like a community at that point because we all kind of were going through the same stuff at that point, since COVID just hit and everything just kind of got. So that might be a big benefit for our specific time period. I think if that wasn't the case, people probably wouldn't have come together like that and been supportive of each other. And I definitely could see a lot of those people just falling behind. And I don't even know if everybody really got the same thing, because after we hit Node, I totally noticed like half of the class, just every class, they had no idea what was going on. And that was not good for them.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. Timing. They tell you need at least 20 hours of work. And with my personal experience, I didn't have that time to spend 20 hours on it on the side. So I mean, I could if I would stay up all night, then not do good at work, then I don't know, slack at work or do other stuff. But I was like, I mean, obviously I can't do that because that's where my money is at. So I just played the catch-up game. On the project, same thing. I would tell my classmate, like, what do you want me to work on? Like, I would let them lead, or whoever had the most knowledge, we would let that person lead, and then he or she could tell us, like, basically, like, okay, this is what I need help with. Obviously, the whole project itself, or like the ideas, we would all share that, communication, all that, we would share it. But the person that was the strongest would make the calls, like what we should do, what we should work on next. Because we were trying to help that person, basically. There was a project that somebody got frustrated because he felt like he was doing most of the work. And I wouldn't blame him. I mean, they got him stuck with me and two other people that didn't know shit. So I was like, sorry. And then the TA and the instructor recognized that. And the person actually went and complained about one of the group mates that he wouldn't even show up into the meetings at all. So yeah, it was like a whole situation and all that, a little bit of drama. So that could have been avoided, like you said, with having a little bit more, stricter entrance into the coding bootcamp, because I did not expect it. Like, I knew it was going to be fast paced, but before I joined, or like before I made that commitment and put, the money, and I was already signed up and all that stuff, I did not know like all the classes that we were going to go through, all the languages that we were going to go through. You don't have that I forgot what you call it. Basically, like the program, I guess, or the syllabus before you even start. You don't have that. That's after the fact that you're already part of the boot camp. So you got to put a lot of time into it. That's it.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of time, and you make a good point, Alba. Like, if you just don't have time because of work, and so they said, about 30 hours a week, right? And it's like, well, what if you couldn't start the entire module until Friday or Saturday, right? Saturday, and then it's due Sunday night. That's 24 hours right there. So that's less than 30. And I remember one project we did, and one of the team members said they were like 2 modules behind. And so it's like, how do they help with this current project when they don't know the last two chapters that we covered?
Okay.
So that was definitely a struggle for some people. I can see that.
So this context is really helpful. That's interesting. I'm going to mull that over a little bit, but we do have to move on. What portfolio project were you most proud of when you came out of the program?
My last one, it is an app that the group that I was with that we still want to make going forward, because one of our classmates is deaf, and so she had a big struggle keeping up with some of the stuff, and she and I are really good friends now, so our app is geared towards helping hearing people understand the deaf community, and that was our final project, and we want to continue making it once I get a job and have time to not spend on job searching. That's something that we definitely want to build out.
That's really cool. I had a staff member that was deaf when I was an aquatics director, and there's a lot of struggles. Well, interestingly enough, it was, to have someone like CPR trained and be deaf and have to be responsive, that's kind of a controversy at that particular moment. But I think that's a really cool app, because when I grew up, I've never met anyone that was deaf, and I didn't realize some of the challenges they would go through in their entire life. And when she kind of shared a lot of that towards me, I had a lot of empathy. So I think what I'm just trying to say is that's a really cool app that you're building. And
that was the idea, was because she's the first person that a friend that's deaf. So I felt comfortable to ask her all these questions. I'm like, I want to know, but I also don't want to be asking you the same questions that I know you've heard over and over and over, because I've had my own other things in my life that I get asked the same questions, and eventually it's just frustrating. And it's not people trying to make you feel bad, but it was an app, so it's you can just go here and you'll get your answers, and if your question isn't there, you can submit it, and someone from the deaf community would be able to answer it, and maybe get different perspectives over time, open it to other communities. But it's called Educatable, so it's for differently abled communities to kind of be able to refer someone there for all of their questions that they might have.
Really cool. I like it. How about you two?
The one that I'm most proud of, well, first of all, I'm proud of that I was able to make a website for myself, my own page. Awesome. And I was like, oh yes, I felt like that was the epitome. And I'm like, I don't even care if I, whatever I learn out of here, at least I made my own page. So I was excited about that. And to include my portfolio, my LinkedIn and my resume and all that stuff. But the one with my project, with my group, it was, which is ironic, it was a website that basically, let's say you're traveling, or you're going, you're traveling with work or leisurely, you drop at a place and you're like, okay, what do I do? Instead of having to do all this work before you travel, you just drop in a city, and then we would just list places that you could go eat, places that you could, watch, I don't know, concert, movies, and just do different activities. And we learned I learned what an API is. And I'm like, now I know where they're getting all this information from. So that was the best project for me, because I learned all of that stuff, how to put visually a website together, right? The HTML part, the CSS, but also how to make it functionable, how to make the buttons click, and how the APIs work, and all that stuff.
Cool.
So I feel like I am most proud of the work I did after the class, because a lot of the projects, the homeworks are kind of, you can just feed off the current module.
Let's just go off of the project that you worked during the program.
During the program.
Yeah.
Probably definitely the last one, just because it had everything incorporated in the back-end stuff. So the last project, we did a chore list. So create a chore, and type in a chore, and it creates a checkbox and then you can invite people to your chore list. So you can create like a family group, and then invite people to that. And so I was responsible for all of the back-end connections. That was so that was a lot of work. So I was really proud of that. Yeah.
That's really cool. I could see that being a fun little app that a family puts on their fridge on a tablet or something like that, and everyone can sign in for the day, or it connects to everyone's tablets.
Yeah, no, it wasn't like 100% complete, but it was hard. That's a lot of, I realize now, like, apps like that are like a team of people, and by team I mean like more than 3, right? So
yeah, that's cool. Okay,
that's a good note to make to anybody that will listen to this, that nobody tells you that before the class, that I wasn't aware that we had to make full-on applications. Like, you're asking me to do something that people are doing for months and ask for investment. So that was something that I would say for me, it was kind of like negative. I was like, I did not know I have to make everything from scratch.
Right. Yeah. Like, I mean, this app that I use, was developed by like a team of 20. And like you said, it took them months, and we're supposed to do this in 3 days with a team of 2 or 3 people. Yeah. That was definitely nerve-wracking.
Yeah, coding bootcamps are nuts, and those expectations are very high. Okay, so real quick, I have a few questions, and we're going to get into constructive criticism. So these will be some really short questions. Well, actually, let's start out with this question. This will be a little bit more open-ended. How would you feel like you were prepared once you graduated for becoming an actual developer, for getting hired as a professional developer?
I would say not, for many reasons. You have the background, but when you look for jobs, people want at least 5 years, not 5 months experience, right? Unless you just, like, after the boot camp, you were just really, really good at backend, and you created like websites, multiple like crazy, then you probably have a better chance of getting a job with 6 months experience as opposed to somebody with 6 years. That's probably like been my biggest eye opener in job hunting.
I think it was definitely the part that I was very disappointed in was the career development part of it, because they had a very specific resume that you had to put up, and I have talked to multiple like senior developers that are hiring managers, and they see the exact same resume over and over with the same exact projects because we all did the same one. And I went into that whole process. I did what they told me to, and I felt uneasy about it the whole time because I'm like, this doesn't set me apart from anybody else. I don't see how this is going to help me get a job. And then, like, spent a month putting that effort into how they had it structured, and then started talking, because I'm lucky and have connections that are like senior developers, and I got to talk to people that are looking at applications, and they said they get like 20 or 30 of the exact same resumes from boot camps, and they don't really look at them because they're all the same. And that's largely just because they're making us all have the same resume. And it's just, that doesn't work. It would be nice if they would try and like encourage people to like find something that you can make your brand, and like build your brand that is you, not I went through the coding boot camp and building the boot brand. At this point, there's too many people out there that are coming from a boot camp that no one really, there are very few people that I've talked to that are like positive when I tell them about me being in a boot camp. They're usually just kind of, I try not to say it because there's like, everybody has their own preconceived whatever about it. And I think it has a big part to do with how they have their career development set up. It's not gonna work anymore. It might have worked in the past, but it's not good. So that would be what they did not prepare, I think, anyone for when looking for a job.
Okay.
That's good to know. That's interesting. I wasn't aware of that. I was on the other side. I was thankful because they will stay on top of us in terms of like, okay, finish your resume or like update your resume to include this work. Make sure your portfolio is ready. That was the career development. But I did notice that, which makes sense with what Rika now is saying, I'm adding two and two together. My instructor, my TA, they would push us to do side projects, get together with other people, do side projects. And ramp up your portfolio. Like when you finish the course, they're like, don't just sit or like go right away to apply unless you know that you are that good. Or you already didn't have any work. So for example, one kid in my class got an offer for part-time at some startup before he even finished the boot camp because he knew how to do stuff. So and it's a startup, they just needed somebody. But after the class, my TA and my instructor, they're like, do your own projects or get with people or mentor somebody to do more stuff or participate in projects so you could show that work instead of having, like Rika is saying, only just those homeworks that you've done or the projects with your team. Because the projects are 3 projects in your bootcamp session, but then the homeworks are the 12, let's say. So those would be the same.
Okay, so going back to the original question, do you feel like you were prepared for a professional position when you graduated?
Should we say unanimously? I would say no.
Okay.
I mean, it would depend on the position. I am most interested in back-end stuff. No, I am not prepared for a back-end because JavaScript is not a back-end language. But I also went in knowing that, and that wasn't my intention because I signed up for a full stack for the reason that I wanted to learn what is on the front end as well as what's on the back end. But anyone that was going into the boot camp without thinking about it that way, if they came out and they're looking for a job, they're not going to be able to apply for just a back end job, or it's a very specific stack that we learned, which was the MERN stack. So anything that wasn't that, you can't really apply for Ruby stuff unless you're going to spend time learning that, or if the employer's open to having you learn while like after you get employed. So it was kind of like if you applied for the right things, yeah, but there's not that many out there, and there's a lot of different areas. And I know I talked to a lot of people from my boot camp that afterwards they just didn't really know what to concentrate on. Like, do I learn AWS now because we didn't talk about that at all, or do I go and try and learn a new language for backend stuff? Because I know people that went in to do stuff with like C++, and I'm learning Go, but that like they didn't really give a direction for if you wanted to like specialize in a particular area. Like,
I agree with that, Rika. That I feel like if you're coming out of the boot camp and with 6 months experience, your best bet to get a job is front end, because like what did we do in every single project? HTML and CSS, right?
Yeah,
and to get that. Like I said earlier, like if you want a full stack, I mean, you had to have that back end like down to the T, like just as good as your CSSs, right? And for the back end, I mean, those were like the last couple modules, right? So how are we supposed to be pros and get a full stack or a back end position when those are like, 3 weeks, the last 3 weeks of the course? So definitely,
I totally agree with that.
Most of the people like that I've kind of kept in touch with were either looking for a front end entry role, or like one guy said he got a front end developer role and he told me it paid less than what he was making at working at the grocery store. So
okay, he got screwed over with that one. But real quick, and I'm not smiling or laughing at that. I do feel bad for him. But you had mentioned that JavaScript is not a back-end language, and so I think kind of what you're emphasizing is you just didn't really focus a lot on Node. You didn't really focus a lot on like programming fundamentals and backend for you to be comfortable enough to have that JavaScript knowledge be applied to other backend positions. Does that sound correct?
Yeah. Sorry. So I started learning PHP first, and I've always been interested in backend. So I was thinking of it in a different. Sorry, that was a different level of thinking there. But I know that for the back end part of it, that's where they lost everybody. Was when we hit Node, no one knew what was going on. And I didn't know what was going on for a few weeks because I was very confused with the transition. It didn't really, we just went from jQuery and all of a sudden we're doing Node, but they didn't really give us a good transition there.
Yeah, I had to go back a few times and reread it, okay, what was Node and what was Express? And then it wasn't even just Node or Express. It was Mongo, right? I've noticed that jobs don't really list Node as a skill, but jobs list Mongo as a skill, right? And it's we used Mongo in 2 homeworks. And we didn't practice any other sort of databases, right? Like AWS, right? So when a job that you're applying for has Angular or AWS, things that we didn't cover, or Vue, that's I took an Angular course afterwards, and I built a website using Angular just to kind of say okay, now I can add this skill. But you are right. There's some things we just didn't spend a whole lot of time on. So how could you possibly feel that comfortable with it?
In my course, though, our instructor, because people were voicing those opinions, well, we are not covering X, Y, and Z, and we're just covering these. What if the job wants that? So he would tell us, very upfront that you just learning here the core or the basics or the basic functionality of the back end. Let's say, yes, Node does this, but you could use something else, or you could use Angular, I guess. I don't even know what Angular does. So basically, you're going to learn your back end, but it's up to you afterwards to show to the interviewer that you can shift those skills, or you could learn that new language. Maybe you might not know 100% of it, or let's say if you apply for the job and they have MongoDB, Express, JavaScript, but you don't know C++ and the other stuff. It's up to you to go 2 weeks before that interview or a week before that interview, learn what C++ is and how you can convert those skills within it and show them that you can learn. And I was like, yeah, in the beginning it didn't make sense, but I also see how in the tech world, yes, there is probably a much bigger population of techies coming up, but there's still not enough for the demand or for the new companies that are being, built every day. So there's still going to be a little bit more lenient. Let's say I'm in marketing, and to be a manager, you need 7 years of experience just to be a mere manager. So if you convert it from a regular job to the tech world, you could still get a pretty decent job, I would say. You just have to, it's not going to happen the first 6 months. You have to keep applying. You have to keep sending that resume. You have to keep, just doing it. It might take you a year or 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Real quick, and then feel free to share your thought, but I kind of just want to sum this up. So it sounds like, it sounds like they produce strong front-end developers, potentially, much more than the back end. And it sounds like they dropped the ball on the back end. They're getting feedback, but it sounds like they still have a lot of work to do, especially with all of you are kind of syncing up with this idea that they don't really get you comfortable with Node. And I think they're trying to kind of pass it along well, we're teaching you the fundamentals. We're teaching you the structure. And I hear this a lot with coding boot camps. And maybe, but very often it's no, their curriculum is just weaker in this area. And they need to revamp this a little bit because, this is a full stack program. And I can tell you for certain, most full stack developers are stronger on the back end most positions that hire full stack developers, they emphasize the back end. And typically, like, I mean, it can vary so widely, especially when you talk about startups, but full stack position typically will be more comfortable on the back end, a little bit weaker with CSS. I've seen a lot of CSS libraries get imported. And, you know, really, it definitely helps with the full stack position to be comfortable with some sort of front end framework, be comfortable with JavaScript in general, but generally it focuses on the back end. But when you say full stack, that can mean anything. It's such a loose, defined term in so many different positions, so that's where it gets tricky. So I hear that it's weaker on the back end. Remind me again, what front end framework did they teach?
We did React.
Do you feel comfortable with React?
I really like it. I tried Angular and then I was like, I don't like it. And then I didn't even bother with Vue because I feel like the majority of the jobs that I've looked for use React.
Okay.
I mean,
Angular wasn't difficult. It was just, I didn't like the folder structure. And then it was harder, for some reason, it was harder to deploy.
Okay.
I went into the boot camp with the knowledge that I want to be a back-end developer, and I was going into the full stack so that I could get a structured front-end part of it. And then halfway through, when we hit Node and I noticed that they weren't giving me what I wanted, I did my own. I stopped listening to them and I just kind of did my own thing. So I don't remember what my point was now. So I'm going to shut up now.
Okay, so
I got thinking about React at that point.
That's okay. So, what did you go? So you went to the coding boot camp to really supplement the front end. So it sounds like maybe you didn't care about the back end, but did they give you what you wanted?
They did not give me what I wanted. So before the boot camp, I had been learning PHP on my own. Mm-hmm. I really liked PHP. I was doing the Odin project actually on my own, and that started out with like HTML and CSS, and by the time it got into JavaScript, since I had a experience in PHP, when I started going into JavaScript, I just really, really, really hated it and didn't push myself through it, which is why I wanted to do a full stack boot camp specifically, was to push myself through JavaScript and force myself to learn it. And then when we did get to the back end, at that point, it had been a few months. I kind of saw the pattern and how they were approaching teaching it, and I know that does not work for me, and they weren't giving me what I wanted, because I like getting in deep and asking all the questions of the why, and they didn't have time to answer all those for me, or the TAs didn't. I mean, not all of them have years and years of experience. They're not all like senior developers, so they're not going to be able to answer my questions. And so like that part was hard for me, but then they also just didn't cover Node well at all. I know that even now, if I talk to some of the bootcamp people that I went to class with, like they don't like Node at all because they don't really understand it.
Okay. It sounds like, okay, so they're strong on the front end. They at least teach you React. That's marketable. And they barely touch on the back end. It just sounds like they have more work to do with their curriculum if they're going to be labeled as a full stack. So just for time's sake, we're going to summarize as that. That's kind of my feedback. And anyone listening to this or watching this on YouTube, feel free to list your comments about this. But that's the vibe that I'm getting from it. But I think like just to sum everything up real quick, because it sounds like it's coming out in little spurts of, where the holes and the gaps are. Let's go ahead and end with this. What could they do better? What would make the perfect program for you?
I think if they just fixed the transition from when they go to front end to back end to make it a little bit like, I don't know how they would do it. But right now, it's just kind of like there's a line, and it's just they jump over it and they don't tell you. And like if they would have maybe explained the significance of like why you want a back end and why this is relevant to what we just did with the front end, instead of we're going from building a front end web page and now all of a sudden we're doing like CLI programs. Like they didn't really say anything about like what the actual difference was, how they're connected at all. I think if they just found a better way to bridge that gap, maybe that would leave less people confused. I definitely saw big flaws in that particular part. Going back, if I look at it now, I would understand what we were going over, but at the time, it didn't make sense.
Okay.
So I would say something like a little bit more realistic to teach, for example, a contact form. So we did a contact form in one of the homeworks, and but the button actually didn't do anything. So we had we had inputs, right? And the button that in our homework, all the button did was just log your input in the console. And then so I created a contact form on one of my personal websites. And then when I got to it, I was like, wait, we never actually built a contact form that goes to your email account. And so and I looked back and I'm like, all this did was just report it back to our console, And so that was one thing I'm like, okay, that was so much, a lot of self-learning. So I think something like that, a little bit more realistic for your own website building.
That's a really interesting discovery when people will try to rebuild. They're like, oh, I learned this, I can build this. And then you kind of realize it doesn't work. What do I do now? If you don't even have the next steps of how it connects, it's kind of throws you off.
Yeah, I was like, oh wait, we just kind of half did this and now I have to do it for real.
How about you, Elba?
Same, I would say in respect to that, you learn something right away, and then you're when you're on your own, it's different. And when you get stuck, I mean, the good thing that I could say is that you do have your tutor, you do have your TA, and there was a Slack, I don't know, something of Slack, but you would throw the question or your problem and somebody would reply to you. It wasn't the same person every time. It was different people that would jump in, or you could ask your classmates as well on Slack. That was very helpful. A lot of help, I would say. But what I could have done different, and which I never noticed before our talk today, was that I would say the transparency. Choosing people, you need to make sure they have, I would say, a little bit more technical background than I have, that's for sure, which I had not. I don't even know, I think. But they have to make sure they have at least something. At least they know HTML, CSS, maybe some JavaScript, or they are people that they have been already into the tech world or are around tech people, because they'll understand what you're talking about. Or if you are going to get individuals that are brand new into this, you have to make sure to tailor that a little bit into your course, and it's not currently. And transparency, what to expect, kind of. I did not know I was going to expect this. A lot of self-teaching, you gotta be able to go, on Google and dig on all those. You type your question and you have 20 pages or 20 answers, and try to find the answer to your actual problem. That in itself was a headache for me, just trying to find the answer to my problem. And I have to read through all the threads. I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe. But yeah, a little bit more transparency.
Yeah, Google was huge. And then for me, Stack Overflow.
Anything for you.
Oh, sorry. My Google picked up.
Yeah, Alexa does that for me. Okay, that's really good feedback. And people need to hear it. And I say this all the time, but every coding bootcamp has its pros and cons. And ultimately, what I want people to do is have a transparent window into, is this coding bootcamp right for me? Because there's so many different coding bootcamps. They do things differently, and some of them are actually fairly unique. Most of them are, in my opinion, as I've been reviewing most of them, they're mostly the same. But some of them provide some unique opportunities. But ultimately, you providing constructive criticism allows people to, before they sign up, supplement. It allows them to prepare and make the most of that experience and be competitive. And I want people to have, or people to be equipped with that information before they go in. So this is awesome. This is a really, really good review. And I think I covered everything I wanted to. Actually, I think we elaborated on some parts. So I didn't cover everything I wanted to, but everything was good. I'm glad we did elaborate. So that's it. That's a really good review. Let's go ahead and do our outros. So, Rika, if people want to reach out to you, where could they reach you?
LinkedIn. My name is rikamaharaj@gmail.com. That's my email. You can find me there. I do also have a mental health blog called I'llGetThere.com. I think there's a contact form on there also. That goes to me.
Is it anything specific with mental health or just mental health in general?
I'm a mental health advocate, and so the website or the blog, really, it's mostly just talking about mental health in a way that people typically don't because they're too afraid to, because they don't want to make people worry, but that doesn't change the same struggles that you have. If you have, I have depression and anxiety, so there's stuff that I've not told people because I don't want them to worry about me, but I'm still there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just kind of a blog to talk about stuff like that with mental health and just in general, things that maybe other people don't realize someone's struggling with.
I'm definitely going to be there. I already Googled it. I found it
too.
And I think that's really relatable, especially with, everyone kind of just being inside all the time. I think mental health is incredibly important that some people are neglecting. So I preach a lot of my own stuff, but that's really cool. I think people are going to like your blog. Deanna, how about you?
So you can reach me at deannapi.com, DEANNAPI.com, PI for math, for the math degree. And then
I like it.
That has all my LinkedIn, Stack Overflow, email, phone, all of my contact information.
Okay. Sounds good. How about you, Alba?
On LinkedIn, Albas Manage, and also my email is albaos91@gmail.com, and I can answer any questions for the bootcamp, or my personal why I chose it. I can give you guys or people my advice into that. I did have a coworker, for example, her sister was into design. She was doing something with design, and she was thinking about joining the boot camp, but also she wanted to do UX designer. And I kind of broke it down to her, basically what we did, how I made my decision on joining the boot camp, what the curriculum was like, and why I thought she would be better as a UX designer, because she already was doing design. And for me, I feel like it would have been easier for her. And she actually went ahead and became a UX designer better, and it worked out for the best for her.
Really cool. I like it. All right. Well, yeah, everyone that's watching, I know some of you are hearing it on the audio podcast. If you're seeing it on YouTube, definitely comment below. Let us know what you thought. And if your experience was different, let me know. A lot of people have a lot of opinions about Trilogy education, so it's interesting to see the university pairing with them. But I want to hear your feedback. And I'm going to throw this out there. I don't do this often, so hopefully this doesn't come off as salesy, but everyone that is subscribing on Patreon, incredibly helpful. I turn down sponsorships so I can keep these conversations transparent. So if you want to support what I do, you enjoy it, please consider supporting me on Patreon at DonTheDeveloper. So Rika, Deanna, Alba, thanks so much for coming on. It was a pleasure. Like I said, stick around for a couple minutes, but yeah, thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you.